I never believed in ghosts until I became one. They say time heals all wounds, but for Elena, 7 years of silence felt like a life sentence. She had the corner office, the designer wardrobe, and $1 million view, but every night, she was haunted by the 5 words her husband whispered before he walked out of her life forever. Elena thought she wanted closure, but when she finally found him, the truth didn't just break her heart, it shattered her entire world. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who loves powerful emotional stories. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today, and what time is it in your part of the world? I always love seeing how far these stories travel. For years, Elena convinced herself she was happy. She had everything she once dreamed of: the expensive apartment, the luxury vacations, the respect that came with being one of the most successful architects in the city. People admired her. They envied her. They wanted her life. But every night, when the city lights glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of her apartment, she would sit alone in silence. And in that silence, memories always returned. Some memories arrived gently. Others arrived like storms. The memory of Julian was always a storm. That evening, rain tapped softly against the glass as Elena sat at her dining table. In front of her lay an old photograph she had looked at 1,000 times but never had the courage to throw away. The edges were worn. The colors had faded. But the happiness in that picture remained untouched. Julian stood beside her with his arm around her shoulders. Both of them were smiling. Behind them stretched an empty piece of land covered in weeds and wild grass. To anyone else it looked worthless. To them it had looked like the future. Back then they had nothing. No money. No prestige. No connections. Only dreams. And somehow those had felt enough. Elena closed her eyes. The memories came rushing back. She had met Julian when she was 23. She was a struggling architecture student who spent more time sketching buildings than sleeping. Julian worked with wood. His hands were rough. His clothes were simple. But his smile had a way of making every problem seem smaller. When Elena worried she would never succeed, Julian believed in her. When she doubted herself, Julian reminded her who she was. When tuition bills arrived and money was tight, Julian picked up extra jobs without complaining. Construction sites during the day, furniture repairs at night, weekend shifts whenever he could find them. He worked until his body ached because he believed her dreams mattered. Years later, when Elena received her degree, she cried in his arms. She still remembered what he whispered. "We did it. Not you. Not me. We." That had been Julian. Every victory was shared. Every struggle was shared. Every dream belonged to both of them. At least in the beginning. Success arrived slowly. Then all at once. Elena's talent caught attention. Promotions followed. Larger projects followed. Soon she was designing buildings for wealthy clients. Her income exploded. Her reputation grew. People who had never looked at her twice suddenly wanted invitations to dinner. Executives remembered her name. Investors praised her vision. And somewhere along the way she started believing the attention. The world became bigger, brighter, more exciting. Julian remained exactly who he had always been. Kind, loyal, steady. But instead of appreciating those qualities, Elena began seeing them differently. She told herself he lacked ambition. She told herself he was holding her back. She told herself she deserved more. Looking back, she realized those lies had been easier to believe than the truth. The truth was that success had changed her. One evening she attended a company event at an upscale hotel. Champagne flowed freely. Music filled the room. That was where she met Marcus, the lead architect at her firm. Confident, charismatic, successful. Marcus knew exactly what to say, exactly how to make someone feel important. First it was harmless, a conversation, then another, then private lunches. Then late nights at the office. The lines blurred. The excuses multiplied. And every time guilt appeared, Elena pushed it aside. She convinced herself she deserved happiness. She convinced herself she deserved excitement. She convinced herself Julian would never understand the person she had become. But deep down, she already knew she was destroying something irreplaceable. The end arrived on a warm spring evening. Their wedding anniversary. Julian had spent weeks planning a surprise. Flowers. Dinner. A handmade gift he had secretly carved from oak wood. He was excited. For the first time in months, he left work early. He couldn't wait to see her smile. Elena would spend the rest of her life wishing he had come home an hour later. Or an hour earlier. Anything except that exact moment. The apartment door opened. Julian stepped inside holding a bouquet of white lilies. The sight waiting for him froze the world. No shouting followed. No dramatic confrontation. No broken dishes. No screaming. Only silence. A terrible silence. Elena remembered looking toward the doorway. Julian stood there motionless. The flowers slipped from his hand. White petals scattered across the floor. For a few seconds nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Julian looked directly into her eyes. The pain on his face was unlike anything she had ever seen. Not anger. Not hatred. Something worse. Disappointment. The kind that comes when your heart breaks beyond repair. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I hope he's worth everything. 5 words. Only 5. Yet 7 years later they still echoed inside her mind. Because at that moment she finally understood something. Julian wasn't asking a question. He already knew the answer. And somehow that made it hurt even more. He turned around, walked out the door, and took their future with him. Elena thought she could fix it. She thought apologies would be enough. She thought time would calm the damage. She had no idea she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. 3 months later, the divorce papers were signed. And after that, Julian disappeared. Not just from her life. From everyone. No social media. No forwarding address. No phone number. No trace. It was as if the man who once loved her more than anything had simply vanished from the earth. At first Elena told herself it didn't matter. She buried herself in work. She chased success harder than ever. She dated powerful men. Attended exclusive events. Traveled across continents. Yet every achievement felt strangely empty. Because no matter where she went, one question followed her. What happened to Julian? And why did losing him hurt more than losing everything else combined? 7 years passed. Then one sleepless night changed everything. That night, Elena stared at the old photograph once more. The image blurred through tears. For the first time, she stopped making excuses. Stopped blaming circumstances. Stopped pretending she had been unhappy. The truth stood naked before her. Julian had loved her completely. And she had thrown that love away. Not because she needed to. Not because she had to. Because she chose to. And in that moment she made a decision. A decision that would lead her directly into the truth she never expected to find. The next morning, she picked up her phone and hired a private investigator. Because after 7 years, she was finally ready to find the ghost she had created. And she had no idea that finding him would change her life forever. 3 weeks felt longer than 7 years. That was how Elena would later describe the wait. Every morning she woke up expecting a phone call. Every evening she went to sleep disappointed. The private investigator she had hired was known for finding people who did not want to be found. If Julian was anywhere in the country, Elias Thorne would find him. At least that was what everyone claimed. Still, as the days passed, Elena began losing hope. Maybe Julian had left the country. Maybe he had changed his name. Maybe he had built a life so far away that even the past could no longer reach him. Part of her wondered if that would be for the best. After all, what exactly was she hoping to accomplish? An apology? Forgiveness? Redemption? Could 7 years of regret be erased with a few words? Deep down, she already knew the answer. No. Some wounds never fully heal. But she still needed to try. One rainy Thursday afternoon, her phone finally rang. The number was unfamiliar. Her stomach tightened instantly. She answered before the first ring ended. "Hello." A calm voice replied. "Ms. Vance. It's Elias." Her heart began pounding. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she finally whispered, "You found him." A pause followed, long enough to make her nervous. "Yes." Elena gripped the edge of her desk. "Where is he?" Another pause. This one felt heavier. "He's living in a coastal town called Oakhaven." Oakhaven. She had never heard of it. The name sounded peaceful, far away from crowded cities and endless skyscrapers. Exactly the kind of place Julian would choose. Relief washed through her. Then Elias spoke again, and everything changed. "There's something else." Elena frowned. "What is it?" "I think this is something you need to see for yourself." The seriousness in his voice made her chest tighten. "What does that mean?" Another silence. Then Elias answered carefully. "It means the man you're looking for isn't the man you're expecting to find." The call ended 10 minutes later. But his words stayed with her. The man you're looking for isn't the man you're expecting to find. For the next 24 hours, Elena could think of nothing else. She imagined every possibility. Maybe Julian had fallen into hardship. Maybe he hated her. Maybe he refused to see anyone connected to his past. Or maybe he was simply surviving, existing, getting through each day. Part of her expected that. After all, she had spent years imagining him frozen in time, broken by what she had done. The idea comforted her in a twisted way. If he was suffering, then perhaps her guilt made sense. If he was miserable, then perhaps he still cared. The truth waiting in Oakhaven would destroy every one of those assumptions. The drive took almost 6 hours. As the city disappeared behind her, the scenery slowly changed. Concrete became forests. Traffic became open roads. Towering buildings became rolling hills. For the first time in years, Elena noticed how beautiful the world could be. The sky stretched endlessly overhead. The ocean appeared in the distance like a sheet of silver. Small towns dotted the coastline. Everything felt slower, softer, more alive. Eventually, a weathered sign appeared beside the road. "Welcome to Oakhaven. Population 4,982. Elena slowed her car. The town looked like something from a postcard. Small shops lined the streets. Children rode bicycles along sidewalks. People greeted each other by name. There was a warmth here that felt almost unfamiliar. She parked near the center of town and opened the file Elias had prepared. Inside was a single address. No explanation. No photographs. Just a location. With trembling hands, she entered it into her navigation system. 10 minutes later she arrived. And forgot how to breathe. The building before her was stunning. Not because it was expensive. Not because it was large. Because it felt alive. Built from reclaimed wood and natural stone, it blended perfectly into the landscape around it. Large windows filled the structure with sunlight. Gardens surrounded the property. Children laughed nearby. People gathered around outdoor tables. A sign stood near the entrance. "The Haven Community Center." Elena stared at it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The name alone felt familiar. Then realization struck. Years ago, she and Julian had dreamed of creating something like this. Not luxury apartments. Not corporate towers. Something meaningful. A place where people could gather, learn, grow. A place that actually helped others. Back then they had spent countless nights sketching ideas together at their tiny kitchen table. The dream never happened. Life got in the way. Success got in the way. She got in the way. Yet somehow standing before her now was that dream made real. Only she wasn't part of it. Slowly she stepped closer. The closer she got, the more details she noticed. Every beam, every window, every pathway. She could see Julian's fingerprints everywhere. Not literally, but spiritually. The craftsmanship, the care, the attention to detail. It was unmistakably him. A lump formed in her throat. Then movement inside caught her attention. A man crossed one of the hallways. Just a glimpse. Only a few seconds. But it was enough. Julian. 7 years disappeared instantly. He looked older. Of course he did. So did she. His dark hair now carried streaks of gray. Fine lines framed his eyes. His shoulders seemed broader, stronger, more confident. But the biggest difference wasn't physical. It was something deeper. Peace. For years Elena had imagined finding pain in his face. Resentment. Sadness. Loneliness. Instead she saw peace. Real peace. The kind money could never buy. Tears filled her eyes before she realized it. This wasn't the broken man she expected. This wasn't a man trapped in the past. This was someone who had escaped it. Then she saw her. A woman walked into view beside him. She carried a stack of books and laughed at something Julian said. The sound reached Elena even through the glass. Warm. Natural. Effortless. Julian laughed too. And Elena froze. She had almost forgotten what his genuine happiness looked like. The woman appeared close to his age. Simple clothing. Comfortable smile. Kind eyes. Nothing flashy. Nothing artificial. Yet the way Julian looked at her said everything. There was trust there. Partnership. Affection. The kind of connection Elena once had and carelessly destroyed. The woman touched his arm. Julian smiled. And in that instant Elena felt a sharp pain in her chest. Not jealousy. Not exactly. Regret. Pure regret. Because she suddenly understood something. Julian had not spent 7 years waiting for her. He had spent 7 years healing, building, growing, living, while she remained trapped inside old mistakes. A group of children rushed into the room. The woman laughed and stepped aside. Julian knelt down to greet them. The children immediately surrounded him, talking, smiling, pulling him toward another area of the building. He went willingly, looking completely at home. Elena watched through the window, unable to move, unable to look away. One little boy grabbed Julian's hand, and something happened inside her. A realization so powerful it nearly brought her to tears. Julian hadn't merely survived losing her. He had transformed because of it. The man she had broken no longer existed. In his place stood someone stronger, kinder, wiser. Someone who had taken pain and turned it into purpose. The irony was unbearable. 4 years she had imagined herself as the successful one, the winner, the person who moved forward. Now she stood outside a community center built from compassion, while realizing she was the one who had been standing still. A few moments later, the children began moving toward an outdoor workshop area. Julian followed them. The woman walked beside him. Sunlight reflected off her hand, and Elena saw it. A wedding ring. Her stomach dropped. Then she looked at Julian's hand. Another ring. Simple. Silver. Beautiful. Final. The truth settled over her like a wave. Julian hadn't just rebuilt his life. He had found love again. And for the first time since arriving in Oakhaven, Elena wondered if coming here had been a terrible mistake. Yet fate wasn't finished with her. Because in less than an hour, she would finally stand face to face with the man she betrayed. And his words would change everything she thought she knew about forgiveness. For nearly an hour, Elena remained inside her car, watching, thinking, questioning every decision that had brought her to Oakhaven. Several times she reached for the door handle. Several times she stopped. Her heart felt heavier with each passing minute. because the truth was impossible to ignore. Julian looked happy. Not the kind of happiness people pretend to show on social media. Not the kind that comes from money or success. This was something deeper. Something real. For years Elena had imagined 100 different versions of this moment. In every version, Julian needed something. Answers. Closure. Justice. Maybe even an apology. But sitting there now, she realized something terrifying. He didn't seem to need anything at all. Especially not her. The realization hurt far more than she expected. Because regret creates strange fantasies. Part of her had secretly believed she still mattered in his story. That somewhere inside him, there remained an unfinished chapter with her name on it. Now she wasn't so sure. Outside, the afternoon sun slowly drifted toward the horizon. Children laughed as they worked on small woodworking projects under Julian's guidance. Parents watched proudly nearby. The entire scene looked peaceful, almost sacred. Julian moved from table to table, helping each child with patience and care. He listened, encouraged, taught. Every smile on those children's faces seemed genuine. And every time Julian smiled back, Elena felt another piece of her old assumptions crumble. The man she betrayed had become someone extraordinary. Not because he was wealthy, not because he was successful, because he had chosen kindness after experiencing heartbreak. Many people become bitter after betrayal. Many people spend years carrying anger. Julian had somehow done the opposite. That realization both inspired and devastated her. Finally, she couldn't wait any longer. If she left now, she knew she would regret it forever. Slowly, she stepped out of her car. The ocean breeze brushed against her face. Her legs felt strangely weak. Each step toward the workshop felt heavier than the last. Her pulse thundered inside her ears. She was close enough now to hear conversations. Children proudly showing their projects. Parents thanking volunteers. The sounds of a community built on trust. Then Julian turned. For a brief moment their eyes met. Everything stopped. The smile disappeared from his face. The color seemed to drain from the afternoon. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. 7 years of silence stood between them. Julian stared at her. Not with anger. Not with shock. But with a kind of distant recognition. As if he were looking at someone from another lifetime. One of the volunteers called his name. He didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on Elena. Finally, he said something to the volunteer and handed over the activity he had been supervising. Then he slowly walked toward her. Every step felt unreal. Elena's hands trembled. She had rehearsed this moment for years. Thousands of imaginary conversations. Thousands of carefully chosen words. Now every single one of them vanished. Julian stopped several feet away. Close enough to speak. Far enough to maintain distance. For a few seconds neither said anything. The silence felt unbearable. Then Julian broke it. Elena. Just her name. Nothing more. No warmth. No hostility. Just acknowledgement. She swallowed hard. Hi. The word sounded ridiculous the moment it left her mouth. 7 years. And all she could manage was hi. Julian glanced toward the community center before returning his gaze to her. Why are you here? The question was calm, direct, simple. Yet Elena felt her throat tighten instantly. This was it. The moment she had traveled hundreds of miles to face. The reason she had spent 7 years drowning in guilt. But suddenly the speech she had prepared seemed meaningless. Every carefully planned sentence felt artificial. Small. Inadequate. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The lines around his eyes. The confidence in his posture. The peace she had noticed through the window. And for the first time she understood how much damage she had actually caused. Not because Julian still looked wounded. Because she could finally see how hard he had worked to heal. Tears filled her eyes. I came to say I'm sorry. The words barely escaped her lips. Julian remained silent. So she continued, I know it doesn't change anything. Her voice trembled. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. Still no response. Only quiet attention. I just needed you to know that I understand now. Julian's expression remained unreadable. Elena wiped at her eyes. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. The ocean waves crashed softly in the distance. I spent years convincing myself I was chasing happiness. She laughed bitterly. But I wasn't. Julian said nothing. His silence somehow forced her to be even more honest. I traded something real for something temporary. The tears came freely now. And I have regretted it every single day. For the first time, Julian looked away. Toward the ocean. Toward the community center. Toward anywhere except her. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Almost painfully calm. You think you're the only one who lived with it? The question hit harder than anger ever could. Elena lowered her gaze. No. Julian nodded slowly. No. You're not. A long silence followed. Then he took a deep breath. I spent 2 years barely functioning. His words were measured. Controlled. But Elena could feel the pain beneath them. 2 years. He looked directly at her. I couldn't sleep. His voice remained steady. I couldn't trust anyone. Another pause. I couldn't even recognize myself. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks. Every word landed like a stone. Because she knew he wasn't exaggerating. She remembered the man he used to be. Open. Trusting. Hopeful. And she had shattered that version of him. Julian continued. You didn't just end a marriage. His eyes held hers. You destroyed the future I believed in. The truth of those words stole her breath. For years she had focused on her own guilt. She had never fully considered the depth of what he lost. Not just a relationship. An entire vision of life. A future. A family. Dreams. Trust. Security. Everything. I'm sorry, she whispered. The words sounded weak. Tiny. Meaningless. Julian gave a small nod. I know. That surprised her. He wasn't mocking her. He genuinely believed she was sorry. And somehow that made the conversation even harder. Because sincerity didn't erase consequences. A breeze moved through the parking lot. The sun continued sinking lower across the horizon. Golden light reflected across the ocean. Julian folded his arms. For the first time, sadness appeared in his expression. Not fresh sadness. Old sadness. The kind that had already healed but left scars behind. You know what the hardest part was? Elena couldn't answer. Julian looked toward the water. I blamed myself. She blinked. What? A faint smile touched his lips. Not a happy smile. A sad one. For a long time I thought maybe I wasn't enough. The confession broke her heart. I thought if I had worked harder. He paused. If I had earned more money. Another pause. If I had been someone different. Elena shook her head immediately. No. Her voice cracked. Julian, no. But he gently raised a hand, stopping her. It took me years to realize your choices weren't about my worth. His gaze returned to hers. They were about yours. The word struck her with devastating force. Because deep down she knew he was right. The betrayal hadn't happened because Julian lacked something. It happened because she did. Because ambition became arrogance. Because success became entitlement. Because she stopped valuing what mattered. Julian looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something she never expected. I'm glad you're sorry. Hope flickered briefly inside her chest. Tiny. Fragile. Dangerous. But the next words extinguished it instantly. I'm glad you're sorry, he repeated softly. But I don't need your apology to be happy anymore. The world seemed to go quiet around them. And Elena suddenly realized that the most painful part of this conversation was still waiting ahead. Julian's words hung in the air between them. I'm glad you're sorry, but I don't need your apology to be happy anymore. Elena felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted. For years she had imagined this conversation ending in 100 different ways. Anger, forgiveness, tears, closure. But she had never imagined this. Indifference. Not cruel indifference. Not cold indifference. Something far more difficult to face. Freedom. Julian was free. Free from the pain. Free from the bitterness. Free from her. And suddenly Elena understood that this conversation wasn't about winning him back. It wasn't about earning forgiveness. It wasn't even about fixing the past. The past was already gone. Nothing could change it. Nothing could rewrite it. The only thing left was truth. Julian looked toward the community center again. The sound of children laughing drifted through the evening air. His face softened slightly. When everything happened, I thought my life was over. Elena listened quietly. I thought losing you would destroy me. A small smile appeared. But eventually I realized something. He glanced back at her. I wasn't grieving you. The words caught her off guard. Julian continued. I was grieving the future I thought we would have. Elena felt her chest tighten, because she understood exactly what he meant. Sometimes people don't just lose a person. They lose the dreams connected to them, the plans, the possibilities, the life they imagined. Julian nodded slowly. It took me a long time to separate those things. His gaze moved toward the ocean. Once I did, healing finally started. The sun was beginning to set now. Golden light painted the sky with shades of orange and pink. The world looked beautiful. Almost painfully beautiful. Julian smiled faintly. I moved here with almost nothing. Elena listened. No money. A small laugh escaped him. No plan. Another laugh. And definitely no idea what I was doing. For the first time during the conversation, there was warmth in his voice. Not warmth toward her. Warmth toward the memory. I rented a tiny room above an old hardware store. His smile widened slightly. The roof leaked every time it rained. Despite herself, Elena smiled too. Julian shook his head. It was terrible. For a brief moment they both laughed. Then silence returned. Comfortable for him. Painful for her. I started building furniture again. Julian continued. Then I started volunteering. His eyes drifted toward the children. Then one project became two. Another pause. Then somehow this happened. He gestured toward the haven. Elena looked at the community center. The dream they once shared. The dream he had built without her. It's beautiful, she whispered. Julian nodded. Thank you. The simple sincerity in his response made her emotional again. Because there was no bitterness. No need to prove anything. Only gratitude. Then Elena remembered the woman she had seen earlier. The woman with the warm smile. The wedding ring. The peaceful laugh. Clara. The name Elias had mentioned. A knot formed in her stomach. Not from jealousy. From curiosity. And perhaps a little sadness. Your wife seems wonderful. Julian's expression immediately softened. More than it had at any point during their conversation. The change was impossible to miss. A smile appeared naturally, effortlessly. She is. Just 2 words. But they carried an entire story. Elena felt tears threatening again. Because she recognized that smile. Years ago, he used to smile that way when talking about her. Julian looked toward the entrance of the community center. She helped me when I wasn't exactly easy to help. A soft laugh escaped him. I was stubborn. The understatement made Elena smile. Julian had always been stubborn. His eyes brightened slightly. She never tried to fix me. He paused. She just stayed. Those words hit Elena harder than anything else. Because staying had been exactly what Julian had always done for her. Through struggles, through uncertainty, through years of sacrifice, he had stayed, and she had taken that loyalty for granted. Julian looked back at her. His voice became serious again. I need you to understand something. Elena nodded. I'm listening. He took a slow breath. I don't hate you. That surprised her. Truly surprised her. Julian continued. I haven't hated you for a very long time. The confession felt both comforting and heartbreaking. Elena lowered her eyes. I don't deserve that. A faint smile crossed his face. No. Then he shrugged gently. But forgiveness isn't really about what someone deserves. She looked up. Julian's expression was thoughtful. It's about letting go of the weight. The ocean breeze moved through the parking lot. I carried that weight for years. His voice remained calm. Eventually I got tired of carrying it. Elena felt tears slide down her cheeks again. Not because his words hurt, because they revealed how much strength it had taken him to reach this point. Forgiveness had not been easy. Healing had not been easy. None of it had been easy. Yet somehow he had done it. She swallowed hard. Do you ever think about us? The question escaped before she could stop it. Immediately she regretted asking. Julian was quiet for a moment, long enough to make her nervous. Then he answered honestly. Sometimes. Her heart tightened. He continued. Mostly when something reminds me of who I used to be. The answer was gentle, but final. She wasn't part of his present, only a memory connected to his past. A chapter, not the story. Julian looked directly at her. And you should know something too. Elena waited. The next words would stay with her forever. I don't think you're a bad person. She blinked, surprised. Julian continued. I think you made a terrible choice. A pause. And then you spent years suffering because of it. The truth in those words left her speechless. For so long she had defined herself by her worst mistake. The woman who betrayed her husband. The woman who destroyed her marriage. The woman who ruined everything. Julian shook his head slightly. People are more complicated than their worst moment. The statement settled deep inside her, because it was the first time anyone had ever said it, including herself. For years she had punished herself endlessly. Perhaps she deserved some of that punishment. Perhaps not all of it. The sky darkened further. Lights began appearing inside the community center. A few volunteers started cleaning up for the evening. Julian glanced toward them, then back at Elena. I should get back. The words felt like a closing door. Final. Inevitable. Elena nodded slowly. Of course. His life was waiting. A real life. A full life. One that no longer revolved around her existence. For a moment neither moved. Then Elena spoke quietly. Thank you. Julian looked surprised. For what? She managed a sad smile. For telling me the truth. A long silence followed. Then Julian nodded. And for the first time all evening there was something close to peace between them. Not reconciliation. Not friendship. Something simpler. Acceptance. But before they parted ways forever, Julian would leave her with one final lesson. A lesson that would completely change the direction of her life. And months later, that lesson would return to her in the most unexpected way imaginable. The evening sky had turned deep shades of purple and gold. The last rays of sunlight stretched across the ocean as Julian and Elena stood facing each other in the parking lot. 7 years of regret. 7 years of guilt. 7 years of unanswered questions. And somehow it had all led to this quiet moment. No dramatic reunion. No miracle reconciliation. No second chance. Just truth. Raw and honest. Julian glanced toward the haven where lights now glowed warmly through the windows. People were waiting for him. A life was waiting for him. A future he had built with his own hands. Then he looked back at Elena. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Julian broke the silence. You came here looking for closure. Elena nodded. I think so. A small smile appeared on his face. The problem is that closure isn't something another person gives you. She frowned slightly. Julian continued. It's something you create for yourself. The words settled over her. Simple, yet powerful. For years she had been waiting for someone else to free her from her guilt. Waiting for forgiveness. Waiting for permission to move forward. Waiting for the past to somehow release its grip. But perhaps Julian was right. Maybe nobody else could do that for her. Maybe the responsibility had always been hers. Julian looked toward the ocean. When I first came here, I spent years wishing things had happened differently. His voice was calm. I replayed everything. He laughed softly. Every conversation. Every memory. Every mistake. Elena understood that feeling all too well. Then his expression grew serious. Eventually I realized something. She waited. The past is a place you can visit. He paused. But it's a terrible place to live. The word struck her like lightning, because that was exactly what she had been doing. Living in the past. Existing inside old memories. Allowing a single mistake to define her entire identity. Julian nodded. As long as you keep staring backward, you'll miss everything in front of you. Tears filled her eyes again. Not from pain this time. From understanding. For the first time in years she could see a path forward. Not an easy path. Not a painless path. But a path. Julian took a step backward. The conversation was ending. They both knew it. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. His voice was sincere. Elena swallowed hard. I hope so too. A few seconds passed. Then she smiled sadly. You know, I spent years believing I ruined your life. Julian thought about that. Then shook his head. No. She looked surprised. Julian smiled gently. You changed my life. A pause. But ruining it and changing it aren't the same thing. The statement stayed with her. Because he was right. The pain had been real. The damage had been real. But so had the growth that followed. Julian had become stronger because he survived what happened. Not because he deserved the pain. Because he refused to let it destroy him. Elena nodded slowly. A lesson hidden inside heartbreak. One she would never forget. Then Julian extended his hand. For a moment she stared at it. 7 years ago, she had held that hand every day. Now it felt like a final goodbye. She took it. Their handshake lasted only a second. But somehow it said everything words could not. Thank you. I'm sorry. Goodbye. When they released each other's hands, neither tried to prolong the moment. Some endings are meant to be simple. Julian offered one final nod. Then turned and walked toward the haven. Elena watched him go. The doors opened. Warm light spilled outside. Children ran toward him. Volunteers greeted him. Someone laughed. A woman stepped forward. Clara. She wrapped her arm around his. Julian smiled. The doors closed. And just like that he was gone. Not vanished. Not lost. Simply living his life. For the first time in 7 years, Elena didn't follow. She didn't chase. She didn't cry out. She simply stood there and accepted reality. The chapter was over. And somehow that realization brought peace. The drive home felt different. The road was the same. The scenery was the same. But Elena wasn't the same. For the first time in years, she wasn't focused on what she had lost. She was thinking about what she could still become. Weeks passed. Then months. Little by little change began. First it was small. She started volunteering. Then she began working on community projects. Projects that actually helped people instead of simply generating profit. The work felt different. Meaningful. Real. For the first time in years she woke up excited about what she was building. Eventually, she made a decision that shocked everyone around her. She left the prestigious architecture firm. Friends called her crazy. Colleagues thought she was making a mistake. But for once, Elena wasn't interested in status. She was interested in purpose. She joined a nonprofit organization focused on affordable housing. Families who had spent years struggling suddenly had safe places to live. Children had bedrooms of their own. Communities grew stronger. And every completed project gave Elena something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Pride. Not pride in success. Pride in service. The transformation wasn't immediate. Healing never is. But month by month, year by year, she slowly became someone new. Someone better. Then one afternoon, almost a year after visiting Oakhaven, a small package arrived at her office. There was no return address. No note. No explanation. Curious, Elena opened it. Inside was a small wooden box. Beautifully crafted. The workmanship was unmistakable. Her hands trembled. Carefully, she lifted the lid. Inside sat a tiny carving. A seedling breaking through solid stone. Nothing else. No letter. No signature. No message. Yet she immediately understood. Tears filled her eyes. Not because it was forgiveness. Not exactly. Because it was recognition. The seedling represented growth. Transformation. Life emerging from something hard and unyielding. It represented everything she had spent the last year trying to become. Elena carefully held the carving in her hands. Then she smiled. A genuine smile. The kind she hadn't felt in years. Outside her office window, the city stretched endlessly into the distance. Once those towering buildings had been her entire world. Now they were simply part of it. She walked toward the glass and looked at her reflection. For a long moment, she studied the woman staring back. She no longer saw the ambitious young architect who had sacrificed love for ego. She no longer saw the woman drowning in regret. And she no longer saw someone defined by her worst mistake. Instead, she saw a person still growing, still learning, still building. The future remained uncertain. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. Because redemption had never been about erasing the past. It had never been about receiving forgiveness. It had never been about getting another chance. Redemption was about becoming better than the person who caused the damage in the first place. Elena placed the small wooden seedling on her desk. A reminder. A lesson. Promise. Then she turned away from the window and returned to work. Not as the architect of regret, but as a woman finally building a life on truth, purpose, and humility. Because sometimes the people we hurt never come back. Sometimes the bridges we burn can never be rebuilt. And sometimes the greatest act of redemption isn't convincing someone to forgive us. It's becoming the person they always hoped we could be. And in that quiet realization, Elena finally found the one thing she had been searching for all along. Peace.